Good morning. I think everybody's one or two just coming through the door. So welcome everybody to Congress House. Hopefully you're all here to hear about Energy Catalyst Round 7. If not, there's the door. I have been informed that there are no fire drills today, so if you hear the alarm, please follow the green signs for the exit. There's one there. There's one there. I don't think we have any disabled in the audience, but there are refuges if required. We will congregate outside Bedford Square. Just follow the line of people leaving the building. Great. We will hear today lots of detail about the competition, the scope, eligibility, and so on. Some of you may know all about Energy Catalyst and Innovate UK competition application process. Many of you won't. We've got nearly 100 people in the room. We've got about 80 online. So there will be a wide range of familiarity with the process. So you'll hear today from Innovate UK, from Alice, who's leading on this competition, and from the competition's team. But you'll also hear from the Low Carbon Energy for Development Network, and in a moment you'll hear from me about KTN. And we are organisations that exist in order to help you to make the best submission that you can, to find information and to find partners and to refine your plan. So, quick whiz through the schedule. Today's agenda, there'll be a spot from me, and there'll be an introduction to this specific competition and the scope thereof by Alice. You'll hear about how Innovate UK and DFID work in Africa and what this competition's about. Then we'll have a quick introduction to Low Carbon Energy for Development Network, after which we will break for coffee, donuts, and all the other refreshments. Andrea and Sharon from Innovate UK are going to take us through how you go about actually doing the process of a submission. And at that point, for those that are online, we'll close the webcast. But there will be some recording of the gender diversity and social inclusion element this afternoon, which will be made available online for watching afterwards. So after the webcast closes, we'll have pitches from those organisations who are interested in finding partners, who want to let you know about their business proposals. And then we will have a 5-minute introduction from Nicola Lazenby from Innovate UK, who will talk about the support that's available in terms of business incubation. Nicola's set up a flip chart in the foyer area, and she'll be asking you to do some voting. So please do take note of what she says and add your name or your vote to her posters. Then we've got lunch and networking. As I say, this competition requires that you attend to matters of gender and social inclusion, so we'll hear about that, and then we'll hear from a couple of companies that have been through this process. So what does the reality of applying for and undertaking a project under Energy Catalyst look like? So once we've finished the formal part of the day, there will be an opportunity for you to get to see the support network, so Innovate UK, LCEDN, KTN. Please come and talk to us, talk to each other, and then you can head off for the trains. So, innovation doesn't just happen. It happens in an ecosystem. And that ecosystem consists of businesses, of research organisations, and in this case, government. So I'm getting signals. Move the mic further, closer, better, thank you. So everyone online can now hear me. And that's where Innovate UK comes in, so stitching it all together. This is a nice little diagram that shows where it all sits. We've got the government department, Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And reporting to them is UK Research and Innovation, which comprises the research councils, traditionally research-led organisations dealing with universities and others of that ilk. And then on an equal footing, we have Innovate UK. At this point, I would point with my laser, but I haven't got one. So the purple blob there is Innovate UK, which is akin to a research council, but closer to the D end of the R&D spectrum. And Innovate UK has two core functions, which is to fund research and development and to connect people. So you can see the green blobs at the bottom of this particular graphic. You've got funding and connecting. And part of the connecting function is undertaken by the Knowledge Transfer Network, which is who I work for. Should have introduced myself. I'm Jonathan Abra. It was on the front slide, but it's only polite to do so. So the Knowledge Transfer Network is one of two parts of the connecting function, the other being Enterprise Europe Network, who is represented in the building here today. And whereas Enterprise Europe Network is essentially local and represents businesses in a geographical location, they have global connections and they are sector agnostic. Knowledge Transfer Network, I beg your pardon, is deep and narrow. So we focus on sector specific activity, and we cover the whole country, and we have very deep connections with a wide range of industry sectors. And it's all about this, the future faster. It's connecting people to develop collaborations. And you can see there it says Horizon Expanding Events, and I think whoever put our slides together, this is our new slide deck, had taken some Horizon Expanding substances. They're quite glorious in their Technicolor psychedelia. But it's about bringing people together. It's all very well saying there's a pot of money, go and do stuff, but if you don't know who the right people to talk to are or how to apply, then we're not making the best use of government funding, taxpayer funding. So KTN is all about this. We convene cross-sector groups, which is taking broad technologies across different industry sectors and bringing people together who wouldn't ordinarily meet. We convene industry communities, which is to find out what the challenges are for a particular industry sector and delve into those and how we might address them. The heart there, it represents people. So we have quite a number of people, members of KTN. I'm going to have a bit of audience participation. Who's going to venture a guess as to how many people we have in our network? Who'll start me at 10,000? Any higher than 10,000? 50,000 I have. No? Any advance on 50,000? No? No? Anyway. More than 700. It's 140,000 members. This is the people that are on our database. We interact with a lot more than that. So we've got an enormous range of people all interested in technology and innovation that you can interact with. And we deliver events that attracted last year more than 20, in fact it's 23,000 people. So events such as we're running here today, we're running numerous equivalent events across the country around different themes. We are a dispersed organisation. We have a head office in London, and we have a small office in Edinburgh. The remainder of us are all over the UK, so you can find us wherever you are. And it's about bringing together people who might not ordinarily meet, such as today you'll meet a lot of people that you wouldn't necessarily interact with otherwise. And it's about creating value. After all, we are funded by a taxpayer, by you, and therefore we need to make sure that that money is put to good use. I won't go into all the detail, I won't read it out. I think you've got the idea. It's about bringing people together. We do an awful lot of activity. It's not just events. We convene steering groups, we represent industry to government, we write reports. Please do come and speak to us if you have any requirement for partners for your project. We will be able to connect you to people who can help. I'm glad I put that in brackets afterwards because I always forget. KTP. KTP is a specific funding mechanism which enables a business to work with the university over an extended period with very generous funding around a specific technical project. So even if you don't engage with Energy Catalyst today through this round, but you have something that you need to work on going forward, and you think that a university partner might be the right way to do that, do speak to us. We can put you in touch with the right people. That's how you get in touch with me. Please do follow us on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so forth. All these slides will be made available to everybody, so if you don't capture that information, don't worry about it. You can always find us through the website. There is a list of everybody and all their technical disciplines on there. We'd love to hear from you, but for now, that's enough from me, and I will hand you over to Alice Goodbrook.
So, morning everyone. Can I just check that the sound's okay? Is that good? Cool. Thank you ever so much for coming out today. It's great to see that many people of you, so many people here. It's great to hear there's lots of people on the WebEx as well. So yeah, really great. My name's Alice Goodbrook. I'm one of the innovation leads in the energy team, and I'm the lead on the Energy Catalyst programme. I just wanted to point out, today I am not alone. There's quite a lot of Innovate UK people here. If you're from Innovate UK, Derek, can you stand up please, just so people know who to speak to if I'm busy. Cool. And the competitions team, come on. Yeah, so if I'm busy or you want to chat to other people, lots of people around, please do come and say hello. But also, before I start, I just want to check, how many people have applied for an Innovate UK competition before? Can you just raise your hands? Sorry for everyone on the webinar. How many people have applied for an Energy Catalyst competition before? And have they won? Okay, less. Okay, there's some winners here. This is what I like to see. And also, just out of interest, is anyone here looking to apply from a non-UK organisation? One of three, okay. It'll just change what we say later, that's all. So background of Energy Catalyst. Energy Catalyst has been going since about 2014, and it's one of our grant CR&D programmes. It's here to speed up getting clean energy technologies all the way from out of academia to the kind of commercial level where investors are really going to be happy to take it to the later stage demonstration programmes. One of the core things that we do as part of Energy Catalyst is we allow co-funding. So we've had co-funding for a number of different people along the way. We've had it from EPSRC, who are now part of the UKLEDN family. We've had it from Department for Energy and Climate Change, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and more recently from the Department for International Development. We've done 6 rounds of Energy Catalyst so far, so this is the 7th, obviously. And we've invested about £103 million of public grant money into this. So it's got quite big. And we funded more than 250 projects with approximately 700 organisations. So you're coming into a good alumni network here. Energy Catalyst is different in the fact it's run as 3 streams. We've got an early stream, we've got a mid stream, and we've got a late stream. And the idea of this is so that you can apply to one competition multiple times in order to get your technology all the way from early stage to late stage without having to keep looking around for different bits of funding. When we started Energy Catalysts many, many years ago, the core focus of it was on sustainable technologies. So any energy technology which hit the energy trilemma of low cost, low carbon and secure energy supply. As we've had different co-funders, the scope of the Energy Catalyst and the focus has changed. So we now look at purely any technology that hits the energy trilemma and the energy access needs of Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And this is mainly because we've had different funding like DFID coming in and more recently Global Challenges Research Fund. So that's us up there with round 7. And for those eagle-eyed among you, you'll notice that for the first time ever, I think I've presented this, we've got a round 8 as well. So that's confirmed. That will launch in May, June next year, and that's another £15 million. So if you're not ready this time round, do not fear. Next year, there will be another round of Energy Catalyst. And the reason we can do that is because we got given about £36.65 million of Global Challenges Research Fund money. And it splits out into different parts. So we've got £15 million per round for a competition. So there's 15 going into round 7 and 15 for round 8. And then we've got 300k of collaboration building, £1 million of incubation support, and 700k of post-competition support. So we're trying to make a more holistic programme to help companies grow. And the most important bit there is we've got this £1 million of incubation support. So everyone who applies and is successful in Energy Catalyst will get some kind of support. And Nicola's going to talk to you a little bit later about what that might be to try and get crowdsource some ideas of how actually you want to be helped. So I said there was collaboration building. So we're doing things like this in the UK, but we're also running 3 international missions, which kick off in July. Sadly, 2 of them are already closed, but Kenya is still open for applications. It goes the 3rd week of July, but the application deadline is tomorrow. If you're interested, have a look on our website, the Energy Catalyst page, and there's a link there to the application form. It's designed for you to understand some of the problems in Kenya and to meet potential partners so you can build a great project for Energy Catalyst round 7. So I did this in Glasgow on Tuesday, long week. And I got asked how many applications there were for round 6. C funding. So we had 154 applications. Of these, 117 were eligible. About 58 were above the quality threshold. So we say anything that scores above 70% will consider funding. And then we ended up funding 18 projects. So this is just the reality of kind of the interest in this area. But the good news is that we've got more funding this round. So hopefully the success rate will be a bit higher. But just to kind of show you the kind of funding that we've been doing with this focus on energy access. So these are the technology areas. It's good to see that we're funding quite a lot of micro and small companies, as well as international companies through this programme. And you can see the kind of country makeup of where these projects are being based. So they've got quite a wide reach across Africa and kind of mainly focused in kind of India and South Asia, but we're trying to solve that now. So, scope. Energy Catalyst round 7, the thing we're all here to see. So we've got up to £22 million of funding for Energy Catalyst round 7, and that is made up of the £15 million I talked about earlier from the Global Challenges Research Funds, and also £7 million from DFID, which is being reserved for any type of energy storage. We're running in those 3 strands, the early, mid and late, and to be in scope for the competition, you have to do 3 things. You have to do the energy trilemma of low cost, low carbon and secure, and I will keep repeating these 3 a lot today. You also have to do the transforming energy access of Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And you also have to answer questions on gender equality and social inclusion. We're one of the few competitions in Innovate UK that has this requirement. And it's quite simple, because if you don't understand the kind of environment that you're going into and the different types of people you have to work with and the market that you have to do, your project is not going to be successful. I say open date. We're opening officially on Monday, so the information's all online. But if you want to get the quick application in because you're so excited, you can officially do it on Monday. And it closes the 18th of September at noon. For early stage, there's up to 300k and up to 12 months. For mid stage, there's up to £1.5 million for 24 months. And for those late stage projects, there's up to £5 million available, and that's up to 36-month projects. So I said I was going to repeat this a lot, mainly because if you don't do all these 3, we're not even going to mark your application. So I just want to kind of make sure you all understand there is 3 parts of the scope of this competition. The first one is the energy trilemma. So all projects and all technologies have to hit all three areas of the energy trilemma of low cost, low carbon and secure. If you don't hit one and you only hit two, you are out of scope. Please hit all three and clearly explain how you hit all three in that scope question. The second part is the transforming energy access. So how is your project going to speed up access to affordable clean energy services for poor households and enterprises in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia? So I think Ed is going to talk to you later about some of the opportunities these markets represent. But we're thinking both on-grid and off-grid technologies for businesses and households, anything which helps get clean energy access to those people in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia who don't have it or don't have reliable access to it right now. So the idea is that we are trying to deliver Global Goal 7, but the most important bit of this competition is the fact that primary benefit has to go to Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And that's different from our standard Innovate UK competitions. So I mentioned gender equality and social inclusion, and Charlotte's going to talk to you all about this later, but here is the official kind of wording of the scope that you have to hit. So asking you to do a logic model. You have to identify the main beneficiaries, explain how you're going to mitigate these things, provide a plan of how to address both gender and social inclusion, and you need to provide this logic model. And what we're asking people to do is not be good at it now. You don't have to be God's gift to gender equality and social inclusion. What we want you to do is have a plan, so by the time you finish the project, you're better at it than when you started. You've got a better understanding about what it is and how you're going to work with it, so you've got those plans in place so when you take your technology to market. Eligible countries. So last year when we launched this, I thought this was quite an easy question. Someone said, what's Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia? And I was like, well, it's obvious, isn't it? Turns out, no, it's not. The most asked question I had last year, and about 120 emails, I think, was, is this country in scope? So I've explicitly spelt it out. This is every single country that we classify as Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, and therefore is in scope for this competition. If it's not on this list, it is not in scope. If it is on this list, it is in scope. Please don't email me about an island or something or other. If it's not on the list, it is not in scope, and that's the kind of final word of it. So I mentioned we've got £7 million reserved for storage. So this is from DFID, and this is specifically for any type of energy storage. It's not electrochemical, it's not just battery, anything that can be used in Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia to create energy access. Interestingly, DFID is particularly interested in certain countries, and that list is here, and that's also on our website. It's not to say they won't fund projects that are to do with storage in other parts of Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia. It just means that they're most interested in these. So if anyone wants to play the stats game of how do I increase my chances of getting it, if you're doing a storage project, you probably want to aim for one of these. But if it's not going to help your business, we'll still either fund it under GCRF or DFID may look at it again. So things that are out of scope. Basically anything that doesn't fit for what I've just said. If it's not going to contribute to the energy trilemma, if it's not going to help Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, if it's not going to kind of be the primary benefit to Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, or it doesn't look at gender equality and social inclusion, those projects won't be in scope and they won't be marked. So that is it from me. I believe we've got 10, 15 minutes for question and answer. So
Indeed. And the extremely tall gentleman at the back with the roving mic will speak into this so that people can hear me. Is this on? Do you have a specific definition? Could you wait for the mic so that people online can hear you, please? Thank you.
Sorry, do you have a specific definition of the energy trilemma criteria?
Low cost, low carbon, secure.
No, I know that, but what does that, do you have a more detailed definition of those things?
So you just have to say how it's going to reduce the cost of energy, make it reduce less carbon, and be more secure. So therefore be either energy access or, so I mean, we kind of contributed to energy access in this kind of the definition. So, before it used to be UK based, but obviously that's not applicable anymore.
So secure, what does that mean?
Secure, it means that you're creating access to energy in the location that you are to make sure that it's going to still be there tomorrow and it's reliable.
Okay.
It's that reliability aspect of it that we're looking for.
Right.
Hello, Robert Edwards from Solar Polar. I have two questions, really. One is the application for EC7 and EC6 going to be the same?
No.
so you've got a different form to fill out.
Yes.
Okay, that was one thing. We did apply for EC6 and were turned down. And we were marked very harshly because our project was based in India and only mentioned Africa. And I think, I don't know, we felt that was a little bit unfair because South Asia is India as well. Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that if you're doing a project in India, it would be marked as the same as if you were doing one in Africa.
So I'll take the first question first. No, it's not going to be the same, mainly because it's going on something called the IFS. So if you've applied for anything like a sector competition or a smart competition in the last couple of years, we've got the shiny new online system, so things should be a bit easier. But the guys in competitions are going to talk about how they're going to physically apply later. There's also the extra question on ODA eligibility. This is all ODA money now, so we're trying to very clearly make it explicit how we hit the rules. And there's also a question about legacy, just because we think that's actually important to bring through to some of these projects as we're kind of moving away from a UK competition. In terms of India, last year India was tricky because DFID were interested, it was DFID's money last time. DFID were interested in India, but actually they wanted to make sure it was applicable to other areas. If this year we do not have those kind of caveats around any country, if it's on that list, we don't mind if you're looking at 1, 10 or all of them, it's in scope and it'll be marked accordingly.
Can you, hello.
Hello.
Can you put in more than one application to 2 different countries?
Yes.
Thank you.
But what we do expect is that if you get given them both, that you can do the work. So that's always applicable. There is no limit to how many applications that you can either lead or partner, but we do expect that if you get, say you apply for 20 and there's 2 people, I highly doubt you could do all those 20 projects. So it's just making sure that you apply for the amount that you can physically do if you got them.
Hi, on the energy storage DFID funding, in the applications, should you sort of mention that you're applying specifically for that, or will it be forwarded to them as part of a general application?
So there's a separate question on the kind of on the energy trilemma and energy access scope, and then the question 2 I think is about ODA, question 3 is about gender, question 4 is what country are you focusing on, so you need to list that country, and the guys from competitions will go through this later, and then the question after that is what technology area. If you put storage down, it will help me to filter out what to give to DFID to decide kind of the criteria of what they want to fund. So please do, if you're interested in the money and you think you hit the scope for DFID, please do put storage as your first category because it will really help me do a lot of admin. But yeah, other than that, I'll read every single one and just see which ones I think they're going to...
I recognise we've got some questions at the back, but I'd just like to check, have we got any from online? Could we take a couple of those now and then we'll come back to the audience in a moment. So, Stefan, could you...
Yeah, we've just got a couple. So Alistair Livesey is saying kind of 2 questions in one. So can a company lead on one or more Innovate UK grant, whichever stage, and can they participate in one or more at whatever stage?
Hi, Alistair. Yes, you can. So you can lead on as many as you like, you can partner as many as you like, just please don't apply for more than you can do.
Okay, great. And then the other one, just from Mohammed Asmail, of the 7 million that DFID have got for energy storage, how much of that is available for the late stage?
So we used to try and split this out when we're forecasting stuff. We don't do it anymore, purely because it is problematic when we get through the applications. So that 7 million has got no defined split between early, mid and late. We will see what comes in and we'll try and fund something from every stage. Late stage, we don't get that many applications for. So so there will be money available for it if the applications are there.
Gerald Briggs from EGB Engineering. I just wanted to... Hello, sorry.
Thank you, sorry.
Hi, Gerald Briggs from EGB Engineering. Just wanted to clarify, is this competition focusing solely on novel technologies, or can we utilize existing technologies that are obviously in place already, like solar? We tend to get the feeling that obviously the competition might focus on more kind of novel innovations,
So, we are Innovate UK, we fund innovation. However, we don't just fund technology innovation, we also fund things like business model innovation. So my question to you is, we'll basically fund anything which isn't market ready yet. So say you want to put a standard solar panel in somewhere, Why is that different? Why is that innovative? Actually, it's probably going to be the business model around it to make it economically viable for the people that you're trying to get the energy to. And so we fund lots of business models. So it could be that aspect for it, or it could be changing the technology that's existing to make it work in, say, the temperatures or the environment or the operating conditions. We won't just deploy lots and lots of the same modules if there's no kind of innovation around the business model or anything like that. So there is scope to kind of do what you need to do to prove that you can get that tech to market.
Hi. So, how are you expected to demonstrate social and gender inclusion?
So we've got Charlotte talking about this later. But basically, we want you to kind of think about what your technology is going to do. So we're interested in your team. So what was your team makeup? Is it all just guys, or is there a kind of mixture in there? We want you to go beyond that. We want to understand how your technology is going to be implemented, and how the people who you're targeting in terms of the market are going to interact with it, and it's going to affect their lives. Because technology and social is not a separate thing. They're a combined thing. You put technology with people and it changes lives. And how is that happening? And how do you make sure that it has a positive impact on everyone, not just a small part of that population?
Hi there, my name's Samson from the Local Electricity Project. I was just wanting to follow up on the questions about multiple projects. You were saying that we really need to be able to deliver all. If we apply for 20, we need to be able to deliver 20. Does the number of projects that we submit come into the marking of the applications? So, or are they kind of individually marked, or, if we apply for 3 and you think, actually, I'm not sure if we can do all of these, then we'll be marked down?
No, I deliberately, when we're looking at kind of how to build the portfolio of projects we're going to look at, don't look at the companies, because I know some companies, I don't know others, so it just kind of takes that out of the equation. Generally, the part of when we start to worry about if you've applied for 20 projects is at the project finance stage. So have you got all the match funding? Because if you don't, that's one flag. And 2, again, if we know that you've only got 20 people in your organisation, you can't do 20 projects. But if I see one company doing a lot, I'll probably question it early. But most people, I don't think I've ever seen someone apply for more than 3. So yeah, just be realistic.
Hi, Fauzi from the National Physical Laboratory. I had a quick question. Will this be similar rules on limits to research organisations and subcontracts?
Oh, you're all so keen. The eligibility bit's coming later. So for early stage, there's a maximum participation rate of 50%. And academics and RTOs can lead on the early stage, actually. For mid and late stage, it's 30%, purely because it should be closer to market. Therefore, it should be much more business focused.
Right, we've got time for 2 more questions. If you do have questions and they don't get asked now, we're all available over coffee, so please do hunt us down.
I'm around all day.
Just a question to clarify about partnerships, and how important is it to have formal partnerships, or is it open to companies to apply on their own, but with a prospect of developing working relationships, stroke partnerships, for example, in some of these countries, because some of that could take time?
So we should have definitely done the eligibility bit with this, because there's a lot of these questions will get answered later. So if you're a SME, if you're a UK SME, you can apply on your own for an early stage. If you're any other organisation, you need to work in partnership. And that's purely because basically mid and late stage require a collaborative no matter who you are. So we're very keen that we understand at early stage there is less, you're doing a feasibility study, there's less requirement to kind of partner and things like that. But when you get to that mid-late stage, you should kind of need other people to help you get your technology there. So most of it is collaborative, and if you're a UK SME, you can do it on your own. But that's only at early stage.
And finally.
Good morning, Catherine Allinson from Green Crowd. And I have a question from my colleague, Alex Germanis, online, who also says hello to Robert Edwards, by the way. To meet the 3 pillars, notably the gender part of that, assuming storage technology, if we're talking about storage technology, needs to be at microgrid level rather than at utility level, or can the argument be built around gender at that level?
You can build gender into whatever kind of technology you're doing. Who's building the tech? Who's looking after the technology? What is the people and the social consequence of whatever you're doing? Be it if you're sticking it in someone's house, you're sticking it on a grid which no one's ever going to see. Someone's still operating with that. It's still creating jobs. It's still creating work. It's still got a social consequence.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Anytime.
So, just finally, any more questions from online? I'm conscious that they can't network at coffee break.
That's fine. I was getting ready to do the networking on their behalf. But yeah, we've got a couple from John Williams, so which I think are probably more application form specific. So maybe Alice would talk during the break.
That will come later.
Okay, fine. We'll hold that for later. Jackson says, can someone apply to expand an existing bilaterally funded sustainable energy programme which meets the energy trilemma?
So we can't fund people to do the same thing twice. It depends on what you're doing. So, for example, if you're testing, I don't know, something at 50 households, but actually you've spoken to an investor and is able to prove this business model, we need to see 150. So you do a separate project to prove that. That's acceptable. Can we physically extend an existing project? No.
Okay, thank you. And then Girish has just said, I have a partner from the EU or only... sorry, can it be a partner from the EU or only from Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa?
We are one of the few Innovate UK competitions that will fund any person from any country throughout the world.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alice.
Round of applause. Definitely didn't falter on any of those. Yeah, fielded those with aplomb. So next up, hopefully somebody's going to own these slides. Here's the gentleman himself.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ed Brown. I'm Professor of Global Energy Challenges at Loughborough University, and also one of the two co-chairs of the UK Low Carbon Energy for Development Network. John, my colleague, who's over there, and Charlotte is also from the LCEDN. Both of them are going to be speaking later on. My job really at this point is to talk in a little bit more detail about the kinds of challenges that Energy Catalyst is set up to address. Catalyst, when it certainly is in the last round of funding, was part of DFID's Transforming Energy Access programme, hence the terminology of Transforming Energy Access, and still under the Global Challenges Research Fund, which is where the funding for this round of it is largely coming from. There's a similar set of issues that the whole of the Energy Catalyst programme has been set up to address. So I just wanted to say a little bit more around that. And I've been working in the energy and international development space now for around 7 or 8 years. And when we first started working in this space, having moved in from other parts of international development, there weren't actually a lot of people particularly interested in international energy challenges. That has, as you can imagine, completely transformed over recent years. So we're actually living through a period, I think, at the moment when the opportunities for addressing energy and international development issues are absolutely enormous. So we obviously all know about the Paris commitments and the global commitments to addressing climate change, but also there's a very strong international commitment for putting access to energy right at the top of international agendas. So through things like sustainable energy for all and through the Sustainable Development Goals, then there are globally committed to targets that by 2030 that we bring everybody globally access to modern energy services. That means to electrification and certain levels of electrification, but it also means access to cooking services. So moving people away from biomass onto cooking with other much cleaner fuels. There's also been a whole series of technological developments that mean that we're able to address those challenges much more confidently than would have been the case 7 or 8 years ago. And also similarly, a whole series of business model developments that are enabling us to offer real solutions to these kinds of challenges that, again, were not there even 5 or 6 years ago. So that's the good side. That's the why we're all here. That's why we're so excited, I think, about the opportunities and why we're gathered together and why this is of interest to us. At the same time, though, there are also significant challenges which we all need to be aware of when we're looking to work in this space. So we all know that despite the commitments to finding low carbon ways of tackling the energy access challenge, in many countries there are still entrenched interests that are pursuing fossil fuel based solutions. So electrification, one of the big goals, still large parts of that electrification move are turning to fossil-powered forms of national grid. And so there are really big challenges at a political and institutional level. Secondly, just because we're providing low-carbon electricity doesn't mean that people are able to use that low-carbon electricity. So at the same time as there are technical challenges about providing electricity into off-grid regions, there are also massive economic challenges about making that technology affordable, and also thinking about, well, what does it mean if electricity access via the grid is subsidised, and yet what we're providing in off-grid areas is not subsidised? What does that mean about equity issues and so on and so forth? So, and I think finally, we do have a tendency sometimes when we're talking about technology to abstract the provision of energy from the broader social and environmental context within which those infrastructures are located. So often we tend to think about energy access simply as the mere provision of energy, rather than thinking about what use people are going to make of that energy. And that's where I think a lot of the issues around gender and social inclusion come into play. How do we make sure that our interventions are actually going to address those kinds of issues? So just to kind of dig down into some of these issues in a little bit more detail, I'm sure that most of us know this, and that's again why we're gathered here, but it is worth just taking stock that actually over 1 billion people globally still lack access to basic modern energy services. And that, as I said before, is to do with access to electricity, and it's to do with access to truly clean cooking fuels. But it's also not even just that definition of people that are unserved, as it were. It's also, there are an enormous amount of people living in urban and peri-urban areas around the globe that still, whilst they physically have access, do not have access in terms of affordability, regularity of supply, decent, sustainable access to energy. That's in terms of grid-based systems that don't work effectively, for electrification programs that are predicated on extending grids that again are not working particularly effectively. And it also means that whilst there's been a massive move towards off-grid energy and loads of developments, there are still many places where mini-grids, for example, are not proving commercially viable. Solar home systems are not finding the appropriate conditions in terms of, for example, the taxation and tariff systems that they're facing within individual countries. So all of those kinds of issues are important in terms of the barriers that we face when putting forward a technological solution. So those are the kinds of issues that we need to think about if we're focusing on going on one of these trips to Kenya or to Ethiopia or to Myanmar. What are the regimes that are in those 3 different locations? And that's just taking those 3 particular cases. However, the opportunities are massive. So the opportunities for southern countries to take advantage of new technologies and in the process to leapfrog some of the limitations of the kinds of approaches that we have taken within the West to the development of our energy systems are absolutely enormous. So whilst the challenges are great, so are the opportunities. And I think that's, again, why we are all here and why we are looking for partnerships that can help us to deliver this. I think the one thing from the research that we've been doing over recent years, that I think is really important to emphasize is that it isn't simply about the bald provision of energy. It's actually about supporting people to utilize that energy in ways that can help them to improve their living standards and their livelihoods. So when we're delivering energy access, who are we doing it with? How are people getting access? How sustainable are the types of interventions that we're taking? And the third thing that I just wanted to note here on the last point here, I'm going to talk later on about a successful EC4 project that we had and a large big program that's actually emerged from that specifically targets not just the electrification issues, which I think a lot of us are focusing on, but actually the access to clean cooking. And I think that's something that's often missed in the discussions around energy access and the discussions around the international development challenges. So in terms of the research challenges that there are in this sphere, then, and these are actually very similar to the research challenges that DFID have set themselves in dealing with the whole of the kind of energy space. Basically, so what are the barriers to us being able to meet those 2030 targets? How do we scale up the kinds of solutions that are being developed? So what are those barriers and how do we address those barriers? How can we be sure, though, that simply providing access to energy has demonstrable long-term sustainable impact? So it isn't sufficient just to say we're bringing you electricity. It's about how is that electricity being used and how are we actually meeting the assumptions that we bring into this about what the benefits of that electricity access are. And then finally, what is the role of energy within the broader context of international development? So how does energy unlock progress in relation to food and agriculture? How does energy provision relate to health and education provision? All of those kinds of issues are important to bring into mind when we're thinking through the issues surrounding energy access. So in terms of just illustrating some of the ways that others have been looking at this, I think one of the things that Alice asked me to do in bringing this together is actually to think through where are the opportunities for collaboration between innovators, entrepreneurs and the research community. And recently the LCDN, as I said, John's going to talk a bit more about what we've been doing more generally in a moment or two. But over the course of the last 2 years, we've done 2 quite large pieces of work for DFID that have focused on this whole area of who's doing what in the UK and what are the opportunities in the UK landscape. So the first of these we produced about a year ago, mapping the UK research and innovation landscape. This is all available on the LCDN website, but basically we go through a whole number of the range of the different technological areas and look at who's doing what's been funded, what the big challenges are, and identify some of the areas where we need further research. The second one is a kind of more of a deep dive into some of the opportunities in some of the individual markets that we did in collaboration with Unconventional Connections, Nick Russo and his team, and that's just actually going live on the website today. So that's a real deep dive into some of the specific areas. Just to illustrate that, some of the areas that we look at, we don't have time to kind of talk about all of these different areas, but there is a range of UK expertise within the solar sector, for example. Some of it seems highly relevant to the international development context. Some of it's maybe less so. So the UK has a massive reputation for work on materials. So there is a lot of work going on in the UK about third generation materials. How does that relate in terms of the price point to simply making the production of current PV panels more efficient? What are the possibilities of new technologies actually being able to be utilised in the international development context? We had a session with the Solar Supergen in Loughborough recently where we're exploring those kinds of issues, and actually some of the things that came out of that is possibly some of the ways in which those panels are delivered and maintained are more likely to have a larger impact on international development impacts and outcomes than the new generation panels themselves. So there's a whole host of issues around that. We know, of course, in relation to networks, there's a massive interest in energy storage. A lot of that is focused on batteries and are transferring the knowledge from the electric vehicles industry into the context for, say, mini-grids or whatever it might be. But there is also a host of work going on looking at other forms of energy storage, maybe not so much deployment of those technologies. So there's I think, a lot of interest in that as well. We could do this for all of these different areas. There's some really interesting work going on in relation to mini hydro and in relation to where mini hydro can prove a reliable partner for looking for ways in which we can find where those mini hydros are likely to be most useful and at the right kind of scale. There's a lot of work going on in relation to cooling. So all of these are addressed in both of these reports. Some of the areas where there's opportunities and And if you're looking for partnerships in some of those areas, then I think these could be useful documents to you. For example, this is an opportunity table in relation to bioenergy that's from this report. It looks at a range of different technologies, some of the main trends within the sector, some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. And we've done that for each of the different technology areas. I won't kind of go through that in any detail now. I think I want to finish, though, on some of the findings from the first report, which really brings us back to how do we kind of go beyond the technological focus? An awful lot of the UK research capacity has been in highly technical research, looking at the technical opportunities in relation to these issues, or it's been about business models. However, there's a range of other issues that are really important to consider if you're looking to work in these markets. So, for example, sometimes we could be developing a technical solution without necessarily realizing that actually in practice, in the countries that we're concerned with, the transition and change that's been happening in those markets has been extremely profound. So actually understanding that process of change, these sectors are moving incredibly quickly. We're running two nanogrid systems in Nakuru County in Kenya, and the developments on the ground in terms of the expansion of the grid in relation to what we were told about the expansion of the grid 2 years before we started these projects has been really, really rapid. So in those kinds of contexts, understanding those contexts within country. Secondly, I've talked quite a bit about impact, and there are a lot of assumptions about access to energy, always leading to only positive outcomes. But there is a need, I think, for investment into more research that's looking at longer term. What's happened with mini grids that were funded 5 or 6 years ago? How many of them are still running? What are the biggest problems that they've faced? How do we gain access to those experiences and share that knowledge and experience so that those that are embarking on new undertakings now can learn from those experiences? Thirdly, we tend to often produce a solution when we don't necessarily know what the question that's being asked is. So in other words, are we developing a technological gadget solution for a problem that is not identified by the communities that we're trying to reach? So in other words, what are our relationships with those communities and so on? And fourthly, what do we know about the plans being made at a local level? What do we know about how the ideas that we're developing are going to be governed locally? How do they fit into plans in relation to education, health, and so on? Being able to liaise with local partners that have a deep understanding of those issues enables you to have a far greater impact than might otherwise be the case. And I think a lot of the focus recently for solar interventions, and this is my background and my area, a lot of the focus has moved on from simply providing electricity to actually how are we going to make sure that this provision of electricity actually meets the economic needs of those people. So, for example, one way of addressing that is making sure that we are developing energy systems at the same time as we're developing and providing ways of accessing appliances that you can use with that energy that enable you to increase your living standards. So you're able to generate income from utilization for agricultural activities, for whatever other elements this might be. So making sure that that's there is an incredibly important part of this work. So I'm, in some senses, maybe teaching people to suck eggs, granny to suck eggs in here, because a lot of you I know are already working in these kinds of areas. But this is the final slide, really just drawing some lessons from our own research over recent years. I think these are some of the really important things to bear in mind. Firstly, that governance and the quality of institutions are just as important as markets and technology in the sustainability and long-term impacts of the work that we carry out. Secondly, that we can sometimes, and I think this is a real danger for a program like Energy Catalyst, we can end up seeing the solutions as all being developed in the north and implemented in the south, when really what this kind of program needs to do is also look at how we can develop joint ventures that are actually encouraging and supporting in-country innovation as much as they are looking at opportunities for northern companies to make profits. I think the third thing is that we need to be more aware about consumers and more aware about the users of products rather than just the development of the technology itself. That's a lesson I think that's been learned a lot within the UK innovation community. It's a lesson that needs to be transferred into the international development arena. And then finally, quite often our relationship with partners can almost be an afterthought. So if we're developing a project proposal, there are some really good resources that talk about how to contract southern partners in a fair way. So for example, where we've been working in international development projects, university to university, we've picked up quite a lot of lessons, I think, about how to develop those relationships in a long-term way, that it aren't just being extractive in terms of taking a small amount of, or passing on a small amount of resource and not investing in the capacity of those organisations. So I think that's really all that I wanted to say. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking more to you later on.
Thank you, Ed. Staying with the low carbon energy development, low carbon energy for developed network, John is hastening his way to the stage, and it's going to take you through some more information.
Morning, everybody. Ed's given you a nice overview of the Energy for Development research scenario, so I thought I'd better explain to you who the LCEDN are and what it is we do and what role we can play for you in terms of your bids. So first of all, I just want to make sure we're a resource for you guys to use in terms of putting your bid together if you need us. We're here to be helpful in any way we can, but particularly with reference to the gender and social impact side of things, but also with contacts, with help of any kind that we can provide. And we do have a large network behind us of about 450 academics, practitioners, NGO people, private sector actors, and policy people to help us out with that role. So please feel free to come and talk to us if you think that there's any aspect of what I'm going to explain to you about what we actually do that will help you in your bids. But there's three things I want to emphasize. Firstly, you don't have to use us. We're here and we came to start working with the Energy Catalyst people purely as a kind of resource for people to come and talk to if they want to. Secondly, coming and accessing our help, whatever we can do for you, does not guarantee that you're going to get your bid passed. I just want to make that quite clear. And thirdly, and most importantly from our point of view, the LCEDN's point of view, if you aren't going to put in a bid this year, please come and talk to us anyway. We can help you out. Maybe you have a bid that you are just thinking through at the moment, you may want to apply for in future. We all know that government interest is ramping up in this particular area, in the low carbon transitions in particular. This is not going to be the last, and my guess would be this is going to continue growing as an aspect of UK business and UK exports more generally. So please do come and talk to us. We can help out not just with this, but with other aspects of your business, particularly in that general area of energy for development or low carbon transition. So those are the three things. And at the end of this session, I'm going to be sitting there with my laptop and my cam card, and I will take pictures of your card. And if you want me to just get in contact with you, have a conversation with you, I'll be sending you emails directly. Okay, so without further ado then. The LCEDN has not been going that long. We were founded in cusp of 2012, 2013. And initially we were primarily an academic concern, but we have expanded very rapidly and way beyond academia. We now, as I said, include private sector actors. We have a strong business component. We have NGO people. We have policy community people. We work quite closely with our colleagues in DFID from time to time. And so we've begun to expand into a more generalized, holistic, if that's not too much of a buzzword to use at this time in the morning, community of people involved in energy for development. We have tried to develop our expertise and our resources online to kind of match that growing interest and that expansion in remit. We are overall, in academic terms, multidisciplinary. I am a geographer, Ed's a geographer, we have sociologists, anthropologists, and people involved in the social side of energy for development, which hopefully you will understand is also very critical, particularly from the point of view of gender and social impact. But we work alongside our colleagues from engineering, from physics, from all of the technical sciences as well. And that, we think, is the critical aspect of what we can offer to you. We try and cross over all disciplines and all sectors to make sure that if you do come and talk to us and you do come you want to initiate a discussion or a consultation on a bid, then we can offer you as much and as wide a set of contacts and tranches of advice as we possibly can. So we act as an information, learning and exchange portal, and also catalysing international collaborations. If you don't have any partners in a particular country you're interested in working in, come and talk to us. If you have contacts, but maybe they're not in the right area, but you'd like more, then again, come and talk to us. We can't guarantee to find you them immediately, but we do know an awful lot of people, academic, NGO, private sector actors in South Asia and across Africa that we can be of assistance with. So please do come and talk to us if that's what you would need. The overall aims and objectives of the LCDN, and this is outside the Energy Catalyst remit, are therefore to act as a hub, bringing together researchers, policymakers and practitioners from across the UK. We are very across the UK. We had our last event up in Scotland, we're hoping to have the next one in Northern Ireland, and we've been working assiduously over the last few years to bring together this community of diverse actors who before didn't really understand themselves as a community. And it's not to say that we've done anything particularly brilliant in putting them together, but actually getting them to work together in seminars and workshops and across sectors with business people, with policymakers, has been a marvellously transformative experience, we like to think, but then we would say that. So we actively try and promote innovative forms of new knowledge, and again, the social side as well as the technical side. I personally helped put together a solar nanogrid in Kenya not so long ago, and putting together fuses and wiring and so forth, and I'm a geographer, and really I wouldn't advise you to employ me to do that, but that was part of what we had to do, as well as doing the community consultation process that preceded that. Talking to the community over a succession, 3 or 4 iterations of what they needed, what their aspirations were, how we would bring in aspects of a solar nanogrid business that would help to focus on women and so on and so forth. So we all try and do both of those aspects, the technical and the social side of things. Innovation is more than just new tech, okay? Financial models, economic models, how you work an economic model with someone who may only have income once a year, a farmer who only sells their harvest once a year, or whose income, as we all know, with the poorest of communities, is unstable and uncertain, how you deal with that in terms of payment for services. So we like to think we built this strong transdisciplinary research community, or we are in the process of building it, because it's a work in progress. It's never going to be finished, to be quite honest. And we're trying to more fully connect the UK academic community and the private sector and the policy community and all of those folk who are now up on our database of experts, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, on a transnational basis, on an international basis, particularly across South Asia and particularly across Africa, because those are the areas obviously which UK PLC, we might say in particular, is interested in, and UK academia as being the sources of people, the largest number of people who don't have access either to electricity or to modern energy services. To act as a repository and a conduit, we will process your bids and talk about the information that you've sent us, and we will use it to help other people as well if we possibly can and if it's relevant to do that. Kinds of things we do, we've got blogging, if you see at the top there, we've got events, opportunities. If you want to go and sign on for our updates, do that. We have a good record of transmitting various calls for bids, job opportunities, business partners calling for other people to work with them, and so on and so forth. You can also register yourself. We've got a little thing there you can talk resources, which is our database of experts. If you call yourself an expert or you want to be counted amongst one, please sign up and put your details on our database. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it will automatically put you in contact with our community and start enrolling you in the mechanism that we've tried to build with the LCDN. Kinds of activities, specific activities, we do workshops, conferences and seminars. We were up in Strathclyde, the University of Strathclyde, with the engineering department just a few weeks ago with our latest events. We try and make our workshops as interactive and as practical as possible. In other words, it's not just a bunch of people standing up there giving presentations, but we try and kind of bring in those specific elements of how to engage with the practitioner community as much as possible, with exercises and with outreach and so on and so forth. We do the state of the field reviews. Ed's already talked about the energy landscape mapping exercise we've done, because part of that building of a community is actually getting it to understand itself as a community. If it's not kind of incorporated in a body of knowledge, sometimes it's quite easy to leave people off, and you'd be surprised how many people in the UK, or practitioners or companies or academics, have been working in the same sector as other people in a university just down the road or a company just down the road and don't talk to each other or have no idea of what each other is doing. We need to get beyond that if we're going to kind of make a big success of this low carbon transition, and particularly the UK's role in that. We need to understand each other as a community, have the proper communication conduits open, and have that body of knowledge about who is who in that field. Rapid evidence reviews we've done in the past, and we can do that again for people if that's the sort of thing we want. I've done one on small island states, urban heat islands, and all kinds of different kind of technical and social areas of research. And trying to bring in new postgrads and also apprentices, people in business who might want to come into this business but have no experience and no understanding. We can try and help out with that as well. So we've tried to focus more recently on a specific set of challenges. We've been funded by DFID, particularly for the USES program, the Understanding Sustainable Energy Solutions program, and that developed across a range of particular projects, a set of 13 projects, covering a whole range of an incredibly diverse set of research and practical opportunities. New technologies, rice straw, cooling for agriculture, smart communication, e-cook, which transformed into the Modern Energy Cooking Services program that Ed was talking about. Policy changes. We need to understand how, in a country in which we want to work, the policy environment may need to be changed legally to allow the kinds of innovations that we're talking about to become more practically effective in those countries. Community mobilisation, my favourite, talking to the communities about their needs and wants and aspirations. It's all very well us having a nice new technology or a nice new idea, but if you can't understand how that's going to affect the particular community of people, the bottom of the pyramid community, whoever it is you're dealing with, then it's not going to be too much good. And their plains of Africa are littered with new technologies that people thought were a great idea, but didn't really understand the complexities of implementation of those processes. So we can try and help with that. And these are there's certainly something that we're very heavily involved in. That includes, as the fourth one down, social barriers. How are gendered attitudes to what is and is not appropriate energy access for women? How do they affect the implementation of mini-grids and solar nanogrids and cook stoves and so on and so forth? There's a whole range of aspects which change between communities, which change between cultures and ethnicities that we need to understand before we can effectively implement technology in a holistic manner. And last but not least is industrial uses. We've also worked and continue to work with agro-industrial concerns, research concerns and private sector concerns, thermal energy services, and a whole range of different aspects. And if that's your particular area of interest, then do please come and have a chat with me at the end, and we can discuss how we can progress that conversation. We get feedback from our project partners, which we try and feed into what advice we will give you as to how we help your bit. Because plainly, it's no good us sitting here in the UK thinking ourselves experts in other regimes and other countries and other ethnic and socio-cultural backgrounds and just not taking advice of the people whose projects may or may not work that well after we've intervened. So we have to have that feedback loop that we've tried to kind of build up quite substantially over the last few years between partners. And we work not just with university partners, although we have plenty of those across Africa, for instance, but also NGO partners from diverse countries, Nigeria, South Africa, North Africa, Kenya. We try and cover as much of the continent as possible. So that's the set of recommendations. I won't go into these in too much detail now because I'm kind of galloping through this quite quickly. But the kind of activities we do, there's a whole set of webinars from practitioners with our partners from Smart Villages Online, which I would thoroughly recommend to anyone who wants to go and have a look at. That's various aspects, anything from the mini-grid game, which is a kind of fantastically interesting software package developed by some of our partners, as showing villages that can be set up on laptops in small communities to show villagers how to use the limited energy provisions of a mini-grid or a microgrid. We have small island states, we have gendered aspects of energy and so on and so forth. So I won't go into that in too much detail. But again, the webinars have been very successful. We've had a minimum of about 200 people applying for each one. Practical attendance is about 50, but you know we're getting there, and they seem to be quite popular. We work in and through individual partnerships, such as the 5 that we mentioned here. The Energia network, which is based in HIVOS, which is gender and energy, EU-Africa energy partnerships, smart villages, as I've already mentioned, and also the engineering collaborations. We're substantially interested and invested in working with the Royal Academy of Engineers and Engineers Without Borders, some of these organisations you'll have heard with. So we try and work with as diverse and strategic a set of stakeholders in the energy for development and low carbon transition field as we can. ASH and ICDRET. ASH is the African Sustainability Hub. ICDRET is a conference of South Asian engineers, particularly technical scientists, that is quite important across Bengal, Pakistan, India and so forth. And we try and link into those academic and technical connections through those organisations. So we've had events and conferences with both of those partners. Current UK research portfolios, as I said, growing a community. Until a community understands itself as a community, you can't really talk to it or for it too well. But sometimes, or quite frequently over the last few years, we understood that people really don't see themselves as a community. So fine, let's paint it, let's map it, which is what we do as geographers, which we've tried to do quite substantially. So we have this database of over 200 projects, 37 UK institutions, You can look this up online. I won't go to now, but you need to understand, as business people, as people who are interested in making bids for this kind of competition, the kind of opportunities there are out there in terms of research and a practitioner and all the existing commercial areas of activity already, which is what we've been trying to do. Community building, critically, the most important thing. Some of you at least, hopefully all of you, are going to be our community, or going to be part of our community. And I cannot emphasize enough to you that that is the core activity that is the most important to us. Not just so we can have a bunch of names on a list, but so that we can have people talking to each other, having conversations across academia, between academia and the private sector, and into the practitioner sector and so on and so forth. So community building is our critical activity. And perhaps lastly, less importantly from your point of view, but sometimes not, disseminating not just academic research, but commercial research, practitioner research. An awful lot of very, very good work goes on with our partners. So you see Practical Action there at the top, who we work quite closely with. Some of you will know about them and some of you won't. But an awful lot of the very good work, the very good research goes on within the NGO sector. And we have to, all of us as a community, work to disseminate that research and not to siloise it, not to keep it to ourselves. And that facilitation is something that the LCDN does. Mainstreaming gender, perhaps that should have been at the top. We've tried to do that very much so with our partnership with Energy, as I pointed out. If you come and talk to us about your bid, your gender and social impact component, the GCRF, which is a very, very bad acronym really, one way or the other, then we will try and help you with that as much as we possibly can. We have a whole slew of experts standing behind us. So here I am as an individual, but behind me there are hundreds and hundreds of what we would call experts in the field who are waiting to be at your service in all kinds of different aspects, but particularly perhaps the gender one, which has been left out to a considerable degree in the more technical aspects of development for aid, and particularly engineering in the past. So we need to build that up. Yep, so I'm just coming to the end here. I've been told I have 1 minute left. Looking forward, we are hopefully going to increase and intensify our support for the Energy Catalyst process. We are already engaged with another substantial program funded by DFID, the Transforming Energy Access program, which some of you may or may not know about, and also most recently the very large Modern Energy Cooking Services program. All of these programs we consider interlink around our interests of low carbon transition, transdisciplinarity, multi-sectoral approaches to energy for development, and helping the UK basis of interest in those areas. It is very, very important. We all understand with the exigencies of climate change creeping up on us daily that we get this process underway, that we speed it up, that there's more money, there's more investment, and there's more interest from you guys in that. So, onwards and upwards. You can help us make this happen. We see ourselves as very much, hopefully, an important and developing partner in energy for development and low carbon transitions. And we're going to help you as much as we possibly can through the Energy Catalyst approach. And that's it. Ta-da.
Fantastic. Hopefully you can see that there is an enormous amount of support. You might not have been involved in this process before, but that shouldn't deter you from doing so. We're about to move to a coffee break and refreshments, but before we do, I'm hoping Nicola's in the room. Oh, she's hiding at the back. I'd like to invite Nicola to come forward and just give you an overview of the incubation support that you might expect and give you the chance to tailor what you'd like to receive.
Hi there, yeah, some of you might recognise me from Bezos Energy Entrepreneurs Fund. I'm now working at Innovate, and what I'm doing is procuring some of the incubation support that will go out with round 7 of Energy Catalyst. So if anyone sitting in the room got any ideas, thoughts, any sort of things they specifically want, would like, I'm running kind of a little mini workshop in the fire area, and I'll come and see those online as well. Just to sort of do a bit of a poll, what works incubation support wise, who do you currently get support from in your organisations, what you'd like in the future, how could we support you the best way we can aside from the money side of it. So this wouldn't be giving you extra cash to get some incubation support, this would be actually giving you the incubation support through our provider. Does that make sense? So yeah, come and find us, I'm just in the little area, and yeah, you can take part in my polls and flip chart paper. Cheers.
Wow, that was efficient. Well done. Yeah, so whilst you're out at coffee and networking, please do have a look at our networking wall. Some of you have submitted your give-get cards. Those have been posted on the wall out in the coffee area there. Anybody that's online, you will hopefully have received the link to our Meeting Mojo page. You can submit your own give-get card, so who you are, what you do, what you want, and what you've got to offer. Those will be hosted online so that people can find you and you can find people with the relevant skill sets and expertise. So please do take advantage of that if you haven't done so already. Those will be printed off and they will be hosted at the remaining events on the networking walls there. So we're doing our best to really socialise all the ideas for everybody that's taking part in this competition. So we'll reconvene here in 20 minutes or so. Yeah, so if we can come back in the room at 1:45, and for those that are online, go and grab yourself a coffee and come back and join us then. Back in the room. Yep. Can I encourage you to take your seats again, please? There'll be plenty of time for chatting over lunch. We are just a tad behind schedule, so we'll do our best to catch up for those that are on tight deadlines. Hopefully we're all back online as well. Hundreds and hundreds of people registered on the webcast. All good? Great. So this morning you've heard an awful lot of context about what the Energy Catalyst Round 7 is about. You've heard where you can find support to build your consortium and to find partners to undertake that work. What we're going to hear about next is the process. How you actually go about doing this. So we've piqued your interest. You've decided this is definitely for you. What do I do? Where do I start? How do I go about being a part of this competition? So I'd like to welcome to the stage Andrea, and she's going to take you through some of the nuts and the bolts of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Andrea Bond, and I'm Portfolio Manager at Innovate UK. And I'm joined today by my colleague Sharon, who's also Portfolio Manager. This is the agenda for today, for which Sharon and I will run through the various requirements regarding the application process for this competition. Just to reiterate that the slides will be circulated after the event. As highlighted by Alice earlier today, the competition is made up of 3 strands: early, mid and late. It is therefore important that you understand the strand and the requirements that you would wish to apply to. Although each strand is different, they all require both an administrative lead and a technology lead. For the early stage, the admin lead must be a UK SME, academic or RTO, whereas the technology lead can be an SME, academic or RTO from anywhere. And for both the mid and late stage, the admin lead must be a UK business, whereas the technology lead can be a business from anywhere. The different responsibilities for each of these are listed on the slide. This slide provides the eligibility requirement for each strand. I'll just give you a few moments to take a look at these before I highlight the key points. The key points to note are that the early stage can be from 50 to 300,000, a single or collaborative project can last from 6 to 12 months and can have 50% research participation. For the mid, this can be from 50 to 1.5 million, must be collaborative, can last from 12 to 24 months, can have 30% research participation. And for the late stage, this can be from 50,000 to 5 million, again must be collaborative, can last from 12 to 36 months, and can have 30% research participation. It's important to note that all projects must start by the 1st of April 2020. So this slide shows the type of organisations Innovate UK fund. As you can see, this includes businesses, research organisations, public sector organisations and charities doing research activity. It's important to note the amount of funding you can receive will depend on which of these categories you fit into. Innovate UK is offering funding for this competition under the General Block Exemption Regulation. This is available to eligible UK businesses. In order to be eligible to receive state aid, you must pass the Undertakings in Difficulty test. This only applies to limited liability companies that are more than 3 years old, and if you have a parent company, the test can be performed on your parent or holding company. You should make sure that your business is eligible before you submit an application, as if you are successful in this competition, we will apply this test as part of our viability checks. If you are unsure of whether you are eligible to receive state aid, you can seek legal advice, or you can have a look on our website where you will find further information, and you can also contact our support team if you have any questions. This is just a reminder of the participation rules. For the early stage, at least 50% of the total eligible project costs must be incurred by the business, with 50% incurred by all research organisations involved in the project. So if you have 3 research organisations involved, that 50% will be shared by all of them. For the mid and late stages, at least 70% of the total eligible project costs must be incurred by the business, with only 30% being incurred by all research organisations involved. So what is collaboration? For Innovate, this means that all collaborative projects must have at least 2 grant-claiming organisations within the application, including the lead. It can be a business or RTO-led consortium, which may involve both business and research base. For this competition, it's important to note that the UK admin lead can count as one of the collaborators if they are involved beyond the administrative role. And for the early stage, a UK SME can apply on their own, or it can be a business, RTO or academic-led collaboration. However, if you are a UK SME and if you are an international SME, you will not be able to apply on your own, and you must collaborate with the UK lead. There must be evidence of genuine collaboration, which you'll need to explain in your application, how all parties will contribute to the project and benefit from the collaboration. Earlier today, somebody asked a question about making more than one application. This is just to reiterate that there is no limit to the number of applications that can be submitted to this competition, and that you can use a previous application to apply. However, applications submitted to this competition will be classed as a resubmission to any other competition at Innovate UK, such as the Smart competition. Innovation leads will consider your application as a resubmission if it is not materially different from that previously submitted. To clarify, if your application was previously deemed out of scope for another competition, it can class as a resubmission. However, if you were previously ineligible, for example, having project cost over the funding limits, that application wouldn't class as a resubmission. Moving on to international partners. We're strongly encouraging international partners for each stream where relevant to the project. They will be funded through the UK lead partner on the same grant percentage as UK organisations, and organisations from anywhere in the world are eligible to be a technology lead or partner, but all projects must have a UK admin lead for the hub and spoke model. For the mid and late stage, there is a requirement to do either testing or demonstration work in either Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia. And in addition, for the mid and late stage, there is a requirement for a partner to have a legal entity in one of the in-scope countries. For those of you who've had funding before, it's important to note that if you have an outstanding final claim or an independent accountant report on any live Innovate UK project, you will not be eligible to apply for grant funding in this competition as a lead or a partner organisation. If you applied to a previous competition as a lead or sole company and were awarded funding by Innovate UK, but did not make a substantial effort to exploit that award, we will not award you any funding. So these are just some key dates for this competition. As you can see, there are several briefing events, including today, but the most important date is that the competition opens on the 17th of June and it closes at noon on the 18th of September 2019. It is important to note IFS will automatically close at 12:01, which means any applications submitted will not be counted. So you must have your application in by 12 noon. Otherwise, you won't be able to get through. And so just be aware that on that day, it's likely that there's going to be high traffic of applicants trying to submit their application. So if you could do it earlier than 10 to 12 on that day, it'd be much appreciated. So this brings me to the Innovation Funding Service and how to submit an application. So previous rounds of the Energy Catalyst competition submitted applications using what we call an FTP site. On this occasion, we're now doing it on the Innovation Funding Service. So some of you who've used this before may be familiar with it, but just in case, we thought it'd be best to give you an overview. We have users from all over the world, and IFS help them to collaborate with their project partners wherever they are. This map shows the location of IFS users for the period of July 2017 to May 2018. As you would expect, the majority are in the UK, and the next largest number is in the US, followed by China, India, Colombia, and Germany. So using the IFS system, you will need to find the competition you are interested in. You can do this by using the keyword search, which is the first box on the screen up there. By using this will return relevant results relating to the keywords, and then you click on the title to the competition you are interested in. This will then bring you to a tabbed view, which is the second box on the screen there. And then you click on the competition tab to view all of these tabs, and then when you are happy, just simply click New Application. To apply for a competition, the lead applicant will need to create an account unless they are somebody who's had an account created already. You can use Companies House Lookup to search for your organisation to save typing in the name and the address. If you're not in Companies House, you can manually enter the details here. We would advise that if you're a research organisation, academic or university, that you manually enter the details so that you're not listed as a business on IFS, and to ensure that you receive the correct level of funding. Within the application, there are 3 sections to work through. The first section relates to project details, which includes the application team. So you need to decide which organisations you will work with on the project and invite people from those organisations to help complete the application form where applicable. With the application details, you need to ensure your research category is correct and that this is used to calculate your grant value. For the project summary, you need to highlight the need or challenge, approach, and innovation and the outcomes. Key to setting the scene for the assessors as it gives them an overview of your vision. For the public description, you need to be aware of confidentiality here and do not include any commercially sensitive information, as we will publish the description if your project is successful. I'm just going to go over the scope, as Alice highlighted earlier today. The key areas is, it is important to note that for this competition, on the application form, scope is made up of 3 sections. That comes under project scope, question 1 and question 2. Your project will need to meet all of the requirements to be within scope to receive funding. Therefore, please use the relevant fields as detailed within the application process to justify how your project fits the scope for assessors. If you're unsure as to whether or not your application is in scope for this competition, please do contact customer support. In terms of ODA, to be eligible for a GCRF grant, applicants must clearly explain and give evidence for why and how their project fits within scope for official development assistance and ODA compliance. And for the gender and social exclusion, you need to describe who is expected to benefit directly and indirectly from the project and how they will benefit. Provide a logic model to show your rationale and assumptions in the appendix. And it's really important you show your project is in scope, so it is assessed. If it is not in scope, it will not be assessed. On this screen, you can see a list of questions. There are a total of 15 questions which cover 3 key areas. It's important to note that question 1 and question 2, as previously said, form part of the scope, and question 3 and question 4 are unscored. The remainder of the questions will be scored. Please note that question 3, oh, sorry, I just said that. You can also note that questions 1, 2, 6, 7, 12 and 13 allow for appendices which are limited to 10 megabytes in size, and each will have a page limit, so it's important that you read the guidance provided within IFS. Section 3 relates to the finances. This is a list of the eligible project costs for applicants and non-academic partners. We'll just go through these individually. Labour cost. You will need to enter the role within the project, the gross annual salary, the number of staff and the days to be spent on the project. It will then automatically calculate the total cost. If you have multiple people in the same role on the same average salary, please enter this in the role within the project field. If an employee is part-time, you should enter their cost as full-time equivalent. You can adjust the working days per year from the default if this is different for your project. Please note that the dividends, bonuses on non-productive time cannot be included within your labour cost as they are ineligible. And when making grant claims against labour costs, actual cost claimed must be supported with timesheets. Moving on to overheads. Just bear with me. We define overheads as additional costs and operational expenses incurred directly as a result of the project. This could include additional costs for administration staff, general IT, rent and utilities. You can select from the 3 options you can see on the screen how you would like your overheads calculated. We class indirect administration overheads as those costs associated with back office functions such as finance and HR, whose primary function is to support the running of a business. They can only claim a proportion of their time, and their work needs to be additional to the delivery of the project and not business as usual. Typically, these costs are not directly related to a particular product or service. The direct overheads are costs associated with staff working directly on the project, e.g. laptops, desks, office facilities, etc. We supply a simple form in which you can list out each type of direct overhead together with the methodology basis of appointment to this particular project. Again, these overheads would not be incurred if the project did not happen. Material costs. You need to enter and describe what materials you intend to use on the project, the volume and the cost. Materials listed must be project specific. Please provide as much information as possible. For example, just putting consumables, 50,000, this doesn't provide enough detail and you will be required to provide more information from the project finance team if you are successful. Any items which you would usually depreciate as per your company's policy should be listed in capital usage. Materials supplied by associated companies or subcontracted from other consortium members, these must be listed at cost, excluding any profit element or margin. Here you'll need to describe how you're using the equipment, whether it is new or existing, the new purchase cost, how long you are depreciating it over, and the residual value at the end. These calculations will need to be in line with your accounting practices. It's important to note that all materials must be directly related to and essential to the goals of the project. It's also important to note that capital usage is eligible within this competition. However, all materials must be directly related and essential to the goals of the project. We're nearly there. For subcontractors, costs are allowed provided they are justified and quantified. Here you will need to detail any subcontractors working on your project, including the subcontractor name, where they work, where the work will be carried out, and a description of their role in the project. If the cost is going to be significant, then you will need to justify who, why, and what you need them for, both here and in your application. It's important that you justify the use of subcontractors within your application, especially those that are non-UK based. As the assessors do not see this level of financial detail, they only see the total cost. If you use a parent or sister company, please ensure you list at cost and do not include profit. Here you would include things such as essential meetings for travel and assistance that need to happen during the project. You cannot include any sales or marketing activities as this is ineligible. Travel costs must be economy travel only, and you should be prepared to provide a breakdown of these costs if the project finance reviewer asks for more details. For example, they might require you to split a trip into its subsistence, accommodation, and travel components. For other costs, you need to check the finance guide for what costs can be included here. If you're unsure, please do not hesitate to contact our customer support team. Here you should include any costs which do not fit the previous categories, for example, training directly attributed to the project, licensing new technologies, patent filling costs for new IPs, which for SMEs can be up to £7,500. Please ensure that you are not double counting any costs that have been covered previously and that all costs are justified. As previously mentioned, the level of funding awarded will depend upon the type of organisation and the type of research project being undertaken. And you need to note that IFS will calculate your grant percentage based on your answers that you've input into the system. This slide is just a reminder of the different types of organisations that we fund and how the costs relate to those. Oops, sorry, skipped one. And this slide just gives you an example of consortiums. This shows you how the funding rules might work for industrial research CRD projects. I will now hand over to my colleague Sharon, who will go over the academic partners submitting your application and the assessment process.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. My name's Sharon Mchugh, so I work with Andrea as a portfolio manager at Innovate UK. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the academic partners. So for international partners, they will need to apply via the innovation funded service as non-GES registered organisations in order to access the financial forms to complete. So GES stands for Joint Electronic Submission System. So for any UK academic partners in your consortium, they will need to complete a GES form to collect the financial information, which they should all be familiar with. This means that Innovate UK is following standard guidelines on funding universities. So this will automate the collection of full economic costs, and it tells the academic partners what figures they need to use in their application on IFS. So please note that Innovate UK does not have access to the GES system. This is why we ask you to send the form to us separately. So once the academic partner has completed their GES form, they will need to include their unique reference number on IFS and input their figures. And they should make sure that these figures match the GES form and the IFS. The form must be with council status and uploaded to IFS as a PDF document. So the GES form isn't just about financial information. Academic partners will also be asked to provide detail on the justification for resources and pathways to impact. Full details on that is available on the GES system, and if there are any queries, you will need to contact the GES help desk, and there's also a telephone number. So when you submit your application, there will be a project cost summary, which will be available to all organisations within the consortium. You need to make sure that the total costs meet the eligibility criteria for this competition. So up to 300k for early stage, 1.5 million for mid stage, and 5 million for late stage. So for collaborative applications, IFS will highlight to the lead applicant any partners who have outstanding project finances to complete. So all these finances need to be included before you can actually submit your application. It will also check that your research participation costs are within the required limits for this competition. So 50% for early stage and 30% for mid and late stage. Please note, IFS does not actually validate project costs. It's your responsibility to ensure that all are within the total eligible project costs, and there's detailed guidance on IFS. So, as Andrea alluded to earlier, we usually get a rush at last minute. You can see from the slide an hour by hour progress. So we really do encourage you to submit your applications as early as possible so we don't crash our system. So if we go on to the assessment stage, all applications are assessed by 5 independent assessors. They're drawn from industry and academia, and they have specific expertise. So applications will be assessed, they will look at scope, and the ODA and gender questions will be assessed by specialised ODA assessors. So when looking at an application, our assessors will be looking to see that answers are clear and concise, that they've got the right amount of information, that there's quantification and justification, and that the proposal presents a viable opportunity for growth, a level of innovation that necessitates public sector investment, and has the right team and approach to be successful. Please make sure that you answer the questions using the guidance available on IFS. This is so that assessors have all the relevant information to award the maximum possible marks. You also want to make sure that you keep your assessor engaged, that it reads well. They might have multiple applications that they're reading through, so make sure that yours stands out. So going on to what happens when the assessment process is complete. This is an excerpt from a panel sheet that is generated once we have all that information back in. So the first column details the scores for a particular application, and then the highlighted column in green, it shows the differences between the top and bottom scores. So the final 2 columns look at out of scope and whether our assessors would recommend the projects for funding. If 3 or more assessors mark this box, we will review the applications and their feedback to see if it's justified. If it is justified, then the application will not be eligible for funding. So this is just an example of an individual application. So the green box highlights a particular assessor's score. The purple box will highlight a set of scores for a particular question. And then we look for what we call outliers, so where there's a difference of 20 or more. So if you look at this side, you would consider possibly assessor 3, who scored 62 as a potential outlier, with the next highest score being 87. So in those circumstances, again, we would look at the scoring, we would look at the detailed feedback to see if that's justified. If it is, we leave the score in. If we feel that it isn't, the score can be taken out and then the average recalculated based on the 4 remaining assessors. So the lead will be notified when your feedback is available, and you'll be able to log on to the IFS system and review that feedback. So if you are successful, there are a number of stages to go through project setup, which is applicable to all the organisations within any consortium. We need initial information, such as a finance point of contact, within 30 days, and we would expect projects to start after 90 days. So the lead organisation will have visibility of all that progress, and it is up to them to make sure that any partners submit the information required. You'll also be assigned a monitoring officer who will be your main point of contact throughout the project. We will also review your finances to check that they're eligible and that businesses involved are a legal entity and can meet their match funding requirements. Any communication from us will be through IFS, so it is important to make sure that your point of contact information is up to date, accurate, and that you regularly check it. Just one final point on project setup. Project change requests cannot be submitted before the project starts. So you cannot change partners or change your funding around before the project commences. In terms of collaboration agreements, projects can frequently get held up because there isn't a collaboration agreement in place. So we would strongly recommend that you start thinking about this now. Thinking about who's in the consortium, what the aims and work packages are, ownership of intellectual property, for example. You will not be able to make your first claim unless there is a collaboration agreement in place. So just on to grants and payments. So if you're successful and start your project with grant funding, please be aware that we pay your claims quarterly and in arrears, and that all costs must be incurred and paid between the start date and end of the project. Projects over 6 months are monitored quarterly, and you will get a visit from a monitoring officer. So if you have an international partner, your grant will be paid under a hub and spoke model. So the admin lead will submit the claims for payment. Innovate UK will then pay them, and then they will distribute them. So there are a number of useful points of contact and help for you. So you've got our customer support services, phone number and email address, obviously the Knowledge Transfer Centre and the Innovate UK website. Sorry, we're going to, if I can invite Alice up and we can do Q&A.
Thank you, Andrea, Sharon. Applause very much warranted there, because I don't think that's particularly exciting. You don't get to put flashy pictures of things in Africa and technology up when you're talking about eligibility and process, but it's very, very important. And I can't emphasize how much work has been done to bring this process under the IFS system, which is so much better than the old one. So thank you very much. You wouldn't want to fall foul of any technicalities. I can't imagine that there are any questions because that was so comprehensive, but just in case anybody's got any, can I throw it to the room?
Thank you. For the mid-stage projects, so the research organization, university can be a lead or cannot be a lead?
Is this working? So for RTOs and academics can only lead in early stage projects. They can be a partner in a mid or a late stage, but they cannot lead. Only a business can lead a mid or a late stage project.
And then the business leading the project for mid-stage can be an international business as well?
So we've got to basically, Innovate UK cannot pay an international bank account. It's one of these quirks that we've got, and we're trying to work it out. So therefore, international companies are completely eligible for this competition, and they're eligible to lead on a technology point of view, but we just can't pay them directly. So what we need is a UK admin lead in order to do the fun admin. So what happens is they become the person that helps to submit the application and be that hub in the hub and spoke model. So basically, the international company can lead, but they need a UK admin lead partner.
And an admin lead, you mean the company? So what kind of organization? is
So
it?
we're mirroring the requirements. So if, for example, early stage is the lead has to be a SME, an academic, or an RTO for both the admin and the technology lead.
Right.
So basically, if you're an overseas SME, you need to find either a UK SME, a UK RTO, or a UK academic to be the admin lead to be able to facilitate you getting the money. I know it's a bit of a complicated one. It's just one of the quirks of Innovate UK not being able to pay international bank accounts.
All right. But it has to be SME, or a large company can be as well.
Only for early stage, it has to be SME, RTO, or academic doing either of the lead parts. For mid and late stage, it has to be a business doing either of the lead parts.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Anytime.
Just have a quick question about, you mentioned that monitoring offers come to visit. Obviously, a lot of these projects will be in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Does that mean we can expect to see monitoring offers come out to wherever it is that we're working?
Yeah, so I want to do this in round 6. Turns out sending UK monitoring officers abroad, very, very complicated. So the answer is, it's something we're trying to do. We don't know if it's going to be the UK monitoring officer or it's going to be another agency overseas, but we're trying to facilitate it. It's just much more complicated than I ever thought it was going to be. So I can't quite tell you what the process will be. It's going to be a keep you informed one, because I'm still trying to work it out. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm Stuart Russell from the Energy Systems Catapult. We're classified as an RTO in this call, and we're looking to partner with innovators. So catch me at lunchtime if you're interested in talking to us. My question is about how competitive you're expecting this competition to be. From the previous round, do you have an idea how many applications you'd expect to receive, and of those, how many you'll fund, and also what type of score would be required to be successsisul?
Did you arrive late, Stuart? That was covered in an earlier slide.
You missed my wonderful slides. Oh.
Right.
So just to repeat, we got about 156 applications last time round, and about 109 of them were eligible, of which about 58 hit the 70% line. We're expecting, because the fact that this is more well known now, we're expecting more applications, and there's £22 million instead of 9. However, you know, we never know what's going on with this. So I'm expecting to fund about 40 applications. So, you know, and in terms of eligibility line, again, it varies between early, mid and late stage. We don't get that many late stage projects, so please apply for late stage, because we'd love to get some going. But obviously the intervention rate around how much money you can get dramatically drops. So we understand why. Yeah, you know, you need to hit 70% to be able to be considered. So that's what we say the target is.
It's Simon from Pyrogenesis. This might actually be a question for Andrea and Sharon. So in the subcontractor costs and the other type of costs, are we talking about the cost excluding VAT? Or is that the including VAT amount?
I believe that it is excluding VAT, but I can come back and clarify that for you.
Right, we've got one online, and then we've got one at the front and one in the middle. So, Stefan, can we have our online question?
Yeah, we've actually got a couple, well, more than a couple online, so we might want to field some of them during the break directly. But just one here from Mabor. What will be the objective of monitoring officers for an early stage project? For that stage, there'll be a lot of research going on as opposed to development of an actual solution.
So just to point out, we don't actually fund fundamental research, but yes, in a feasibility study, it is quite research-based. So basically, they're checking that you've got your work. So when we approve your grant, you do a base level plan, which says that what work packages you're going to do and when you're going to do them. Our monitoring officer checks if you're doing what you said you were going to do against the plan that you've done, against the time limits you've provided yourself, in the cost categories that you put in your application. They are literally making sure that you're doing what you said you're going to do. Both research, technology, anything going, they're there to check it's eligible, and so therefore your claim can be paid. That's their role.
Okay, thank you. Then just another one from Alistair Livesey. Do the technical assessors see the questions to the scope questions for context for the scored questions, or to allow us to refer to the scope appendices? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So, Alistair, they're going to see every single question. However, they can't actually take points from a previous question to answer the question that you're doing. You've got to think of it like a GCSE paper. You know, if you're answering question B and the criteria says you have to hit this, you need to hit that in the question to get the points. It is literally like doing an exam. Obviously, they'll understand the project summary to get the context of the technology that they're doing, but you have to answer the right bit in the right box to be able to get the marks.
One more from online?
Yeah, one more, yeah. If the admin lead is a UK SME, can the technology lead be from another EU country?
Yes.
Thank you.
Musin from Practi. We are a Singaporean company, and we have our academic partner here. When we apply, when we do the joint applications, the previous collaboration or the one that's will start next week, can we use that as our participation in the application?
I don't think I quite got that one. So you're doing a project now, and you're wanting to apply for round 7. So yes, you can use the same partners, but you'll need to do different projects, and you'll have to kind of go through the same competition process in terms of signing them up.
I understand for when we apply, we have to contribute. There is a minimum that has to be contributed. So the current, the past, and the collaboration that will start next week, can it be counted as our participation or not?
So the match funding element, you can't match grant with, so you can't match fund grant by using a different grant. It has to be private investment.
Okay.
Right, John's just going to sprint across the room to the gentleman, the fawn beige taupe jacket. And then it's going to go.
Thank you. Can I just pick up on the match funding issues? I think you've talked a number of times about the maximum percentage that an academic institution can be involved. What level of match funding are you anticipating or is required? I haven't heard that this morning, and maybe I've been not listening, with respect to the early stage applications.
So we're just going to get the slide up for you.
So, as you can see, if you are a early stage or a mid-stage project, so someone that's doing feasibility or industrial research, the maximum grant rate that you can get as a small company is 70%, as a medium company it's 60%, and as a large it's 50%. If you are an academic, you can get 100% or 80% of full economic costs, which I have been told that if you're an academic, that makes sense. So hope someone can counter me if I'm wrong. If you're a RTO or a public sector, you're under the same kind of rules of 100%. The moment it goes to experimental development, your grant rate drops to 45%, 35%, and then 25% if you're a large company.
And is it the same for the reciprocating partners in other countries?
So international partners are eligible for the same grant rate of a UK equivalent. So yes is the answer.
Hi, it's Greenergy Limited. At a late stage project that, as a British company that already spent £2 million in a renewable project in Africa, already registered with HMRC that R&D fund for past 2 years, that it's a similar question the gentleman asked about the participating, that what percentage of the funding that the money already been spent, is that considered as the participation of funding from our side, or we have to show the cash equivalent in our account to participate funding. Yeah.
So, say you're doing an early stage project and it costs you 100k, let's keep the math simple. We're going to give you 70k if you're a small company. We're expecting to see 30%.
It's a late stage project.
So oh, don't make me do maths. Okay, so you're doing a project of 100k. We're going to give you 45k of that. We're expecting to see 55k. Because it's a long project, we actually only need to see the first quarter's worth of match in your bank account at that point in time, but we're still expecting to see it. So the moment that you say you've spent 10k, we're still only going to give you the 45% of it, not the you're going to have to find that 55% because we pay everything in, you know, at the end point of that quarter.
All right, thank you.
I just wonder, with the universities, can you use universities as subcontractors, especially if you need them to do either specified measurement or something much more specific? Is it viewed as a negative if you use universities just as a subcontractor rather than being a full partner?
So, no, I mean, our question is that why are you getting someone in as a subcontractor, not a partner? I mean, that's always the question we have with subcontractors. What are they specifically doing, which means that they're not, they don't have a big enough slice of the kind of the pie, so to speak, in order to warrant being a partner?
We usually only expect you to have subcontractors if you actually can't find the relevant skill set sort of within the UK, for example. So we ask you to justify why you use subcontractors.
But if that's what your project needs, theoretically, and you can justify it, we're not going to criticise you for it. You know what your project needs.
Hi. In terms of the administrative lead, do they have to have a technical role in the project, or can they be just there to do the project management, making sure everything runs smoothly?
They can literally just do the admin. I mean, it's going to be a great job, but they can do the admin. Realistically, we would expect them probably want to do something else, but if they're happy doing the admin, they're happy doing the admin.
And the evaluators wouldn't mark the...
No, so if they're only doing the admin, it doesn't count as a collaboration in terms of what when we say a mid or late stage has to be collaborative, that ain't a collaboration. Okay. What we mean is it has to be technologically collaborative, but apart from that, no, if you're eligible to apply on your own as an international organisation, if you've got a UK admin lead, that's fine.
Right, we've got time for 2 more questions and then maybe one online if there's any more.
Good morning, my name is James from Pumped Heat. Do I understand that if you have foreign partners, we're going to end up as the lead, if we're the lead, as the bank, i.e. you're going to pay us and we have to then pass the money on?
Yes.
And isn't that quite a risky thing? Doesn't that make everyone much more uncomfortable? Because normally it's like I do my bit of work and I know the government are going to pay me even if my partner messes up, but it puts a lot of risk onto the person who's handling the money.
I mean, I guess yes and no. There's definitely more time that's going to be required by the admin lead. So please, when you're applying as an admin lead, make sure you're putting enough time to do this bit, because it's not quite as simple as, oh, it's just a bank transfer. You're going to get a spreadsheet. You're going to have to check things. You're going to make sure it's all right. Yeah, I guess there is a bit more risk attached to it. However, there is a contract in place to say that this is going to happen and that the UK admin lead has to do that. So therefore, if they don't pass on the money, they are breaking their contract and we will take appropriate action.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Niall. I am from Lambda Stretch. We applied last year and we scored 89%. To our surprise, we didn't get anything. And in the section of why we weren't supported, it was completely blank. It was highly frustrating. What is the minimum? I don't know. My point is, if 89% wasn't good enough, what is good enough?
Can I ask what your company's called?
Lambda Stretch.
Okay, so I'm going to have to admit something which I didn't really want to admit. So the feedback that got given out, there's basically one assessor for each bit of feedback's been duplicated in certain applications. So the score and the mark's wrong. I only found this out about 2 weeks ago when trying to fix it. So basically, the score that you've got of 89, isn't your score, because I know every score that got funded under round 6, and no one that scored 89 didn't get funding. So we're trying to sort it out. Basically, the requirements of scoring for round 6 varied from, for a feasibility study, I think we stopped scoring at about 75. For a mid and a late stage, there was only one late stage project that was actually fundable, so we funded that. Mid stage, it was about 78, I think, but that is off the top of my head, so I'm going to need to check it. But yeah, I'm really sorry. I'll sort your scores out. I'll go and get them for you.
I won't lie to you. That was rather confusing answer, but I'll touch base with you later.
Stefan, anything more online?
Yeah, there's a few which I'll, as I say, I'll probably field during the break to save time. There's just one here for early projects. Do we need to show the full 30% at day 1, or would something like the first quarter's requirement be adequate?
Normally first quarter.
Okay, thank you.
John, one more down here, this lady, and then we'll wrap up because we're being quite generous.
Being very generous, Jonathan, for you.
Hi, I'm Joanne from Simplex Cleantech. My question is, when you say bespoke support, how bespoke is the support? As in, how much would you help, basically?
In terms of what bit?
I was just reading. And it said bespoke.
Oh, see, so this is off our KTN banner. So
I'll leave that for Jonathan.
Yeah. This is not specific to the Energy Catalyst competition. This is generic Innovate UK, Knowledge Transfer Network publicity. So that just means that if you come to us, we will tailor the support to your organisation. We won't give you a standard package of measures. We will, talk to you about your needs and your skills, and we will find the partners for you and the funding that's appropriate to your organisation. Yeah. Good.
Just to reiterate, there is a lot of help out there. So the KTN will help you find UK partners, the LC and international partners. The LCEDN can help us find international partners. We've got people like the Enterprise Europe Network who are running the missions who will help you do international partners. You tell us what you need, and we'll move heaven and earth to find you what you need to do a project. We know it's difficult. We know this isn't the easiest competition in the world. So we've got a number of bits of support around here to help make it as easy as possible. Contact us and we will help.
On that point, and just before we sign off the webcast, we have the 3 missions to Myanmar, to Ethiopia and to Kenya. If you are interested in partnering with organisations in any of those countries, do let us know. We will make sure that you're represented when our teams go out on the mission, so that we can help you to find the appropriate partners. That wraps up the Q&A session. I think we're going to hit the big red button on the webcast, so thank you to everybody. Sorry? I'm going to take over the webcast for 10 minutes. You're going to take it over? All right, well, we were about to go into the pitch session, which doesn't usually get webcast. Okay. All right, thank you. So, we're about to move into the pitches session. So, if I can scroll down back to where we were.
Here, okay. Hello everyone. I'm really pleased that you guys have turned up after lunch. This is shy of who was here this morning. My name's Charlotte Ray. I'm going to speak to you for about 10-15 minutes about gender and social inclusion, especially when it comes to your applications. Those who are on the WebEx, are we WebEx in currently? No, we're not. That's fine. Anyway, there is the version that will be online is there's going to be a lot more text, but I took the mundane text out of that for purposes and put some, some images because it's nice like that. So, gender equality, social inclusion. What is it and why does it matter? Originally, this slide was going to be because it is a prerequisite for your application, but I thought actually that would be the end of my presentation, and then that wouldn't be very good for us. So basically, I think that the importance for gender Jezi, is that we should be thinking about this anyway. We should be already be doing this in our projects, in our companies, in our businesses, and as well as to the projects we do. But unfortunately, we know that's not the case. So basically, gender equality and social inclusion addresses unequal power relations. It tries to rebalance that and ensure equal rights and opportunities for all individuals, men, women, different social groups, etc. And this needs to be applied, my personal opinion, I'm a social scientist, forgive me, in every aspect of your life, and especially in this project. Now, for EC7, this round, compared to EC6, gender and social inclusion wasn't a scope question before, whereas it is now. So it will be marked, and it will be critiqued in much more detail than before. So I just wanted to go through a few sort of basics, really. So what does it mean to be socially inclusive? And like you, Jonathan, I pulled this perhaps not so inclusive image from Google at some point last night while putting this slide together. But it basically enables all people and communities to fully participate in society, and it helps them to overcome inequality and disadvantage. And it also promotes all groups of people, so that could be women and men, community elders, disability groups, youth, breaking that down by age. Different aspects and different people in society have different needs, and we need to ensure that we can target them. And basically, Jakob Mulligata is a colleague of ours at UCL, and he quite poignantly wrote that social inclusion can be a goal, process, and or outcome in pursuit of development opportunities. I just also, before I go on, just with the caveat that Alice and the Innovate team, they're really keen to point out that we don't request you to be experts in this area. We don't want you to say, we're going to be completely socially inclusive in gender, we're going to do everything. Actually, it's taking perhaps very small tasks, small aspects, but being really able to delve into those in more detail throughout the lifespan of your project. And it's about looking at that development and that legacy of these issues over a period of time. So it's something that I think, if you're not so sharp on, shall we say, at the moment, I mean, I did like in the pictures before, is sort of what we need. Nobody needed a gender or social inclusion expert, which obviously I just assumed everybody was experts in this field. However, when I did EC6 last year, we got an awful lot of applications sort of going, how do we do gender? Question mark. Please believe me when I say that was actually a few emails we had. So also gender obviously is part of the broader social inclusion process. So actually what is gender? But it's the different social, behavioural, cultural attributes, expectations and norms associated with being male or female. Basically, in a nutshell, gender is about women and men. It's not just single sex. This slide, you can't see it. I'm so sorry. But these will be online. I want to point that this, and a lot of the slides that will be online, is a reference point for you to look back at when it comes to writing your applications. So there are different terms: gender roles, gender equity, gender responsive, gender mainstreaming. Again, look at these terms, understand what these different terms mean, and being able to write those into your proposal. I mean, I've just put that here just for a reference point, but these will all be online. So when it comes to gender and development, so obviously we know that women and men experience poverty, development differently all around the world. Last week there was a BBC or an article in the BBC from a study from Cardiff University that said that gender affects the promotion of women in academia. It should be men affects the promotion of women in academia, but I think they were being polite. So there are inequalities everywhere. And the first sort of the quote in the picture I'd like to explain. I've spent the past probably 7-8 years in the household energy sector, looking also specifically at clean cooking. And so when it comes to the promotion, distribution of clean cook stoves, we often think of women as beneficiaries. So this picture here is of a wonderful group of women at the Nottingham Refugee Forum who I've previously had the pleasure of working with. And they cook food on a whole range of different cook stoves. But we see them as the end user. Actually, they're our target audience, they're our target market. Those are the people who are going to buy these stoves. But then in contrast, for example, this quote is from a a publication a colleague of mine wrote, and says female-led enterprises are underrepresented at the high levels of the chain, i.e. production and distribution, where mass markets are more likely to drive higher sales and revenues. So actually, even though we potentially are targeting women in the clean cooking sector, we're not targeting them at the higher end of the value chain. So actually, they're still not making profit vis-a-vis men. And so we need to start to understand and recognise the important contributions women have as decision makers, stakeholders, educators, etc., and the fact that they are very key in addressing and overcoming many of the barriers that we face in development. And just sort of, Ed went through this this morning, so why consider gender and social inclusion? So prerequisite, there was no Millennium Development Goal at Energy, but quote, energy was central to the achievement of all MDGs. So therefore, when the SDGs came up, obviously there's SDG 7, specifically addresses energy, SDG 5, specifically addresses gender. 6 of the 16 SDGs, I think it's 16, I apologise if that's wrong, address inclusion specifically in their aims. And gender has also specifically said that they are central to achieving gender, addressing gender is integral to achieving all of the SDGs. So basically, for development projects to have maximum impact, you need to account for gender and social inclusion from the outset of your project. And I think one thing that Innovate and Catalyst does very well is that you need to point out from the very onset how you're going to do this. So you've got not just the scope questions, there is the appendix, and you have the wonderful logic model that you need to put, and all of this needs to address gender and social inclusion throughout that. You know, we need to understand what the different needs of women and men are in the projects, in development projects. Also different groups of society, what roles do they play? Who, you know, how are they being recruited, or how are they involved? What is the hierarchy involved in that? You know, and we need to be able to, they require different policy and project approaches, and I think that's really important for us to consider now at the inception of some of these projects. So how do we GCRF, as John said, it's a terrible acronym, but why not? We'll go with it. How do we GCRF it? So there needs to be a commitment. There needs to be a commitment and a framework. And just for basic conditions and the development of your project, it needs to address these issues from day one. We need concrete objectives and tasks. We also need accurate monitoring and reporting on these issues at every step of the way. Energy Catalyst has quarterly reporting requirements, and you have to address these issues at every step of the way. And this is just a, you know, everybody loves a toolkit. So just a image adapted from Energia, who are a wonderful source. They obviously, John mentioned earlier, if you have not heard of them before, look them up, look at their toolkits, look what they do. They are very big in the energy, gender and development space. But basically, when it comes to gender and social inclusion, where does it go? How do we look at it? But it needs to be throughout, continuously throughout your project lifecycle, from the context, the analysis, the assessment, the action plans, to the implementation, all the way through to monitoring and reporting. This needs to be addressed at every single step of the way. And this is the one slide with all the text I didn't want to take out, because I actually just wanted us to sort of go through this and understand actually what do we do, or what can we think about, what steps can be taken when we're thinking about action plans in our Energy Catalyst projects. And I say this because obviously we're here at a specific Catalyst event, but actually any projects that you go for funding, or even in your corporate policies, for example, these aspects do need to be considered. So what is it? So we need a goal or objective, like I said before, and we need to look at that in the logic model and annual work plans and reporting frameworks, and we need to address that goal every single time. We need a set of responsive actions that will address the needs of vulnerable people in the community. Where are they? Are they the consumers? Are you working with them? Are they agents? Are they the developers of the technology? Who are these people? Who do they represent in society? And actually, how can we effectively work with them? We also need different types of implementation actions and also the institutionalisation of mainstreaming in the project. And I think that's really important. Alice said earlier, like, who are you working with? What is your project makeup? Are they all men? Are they all women? Where are they in Global South, the Global North? At what levels are they working? Are we working with women as agents pretty much at the bottom where you've got the CEOs who are directors are all men? We need to actually have a look at these dynamics in order to address them. And again, we need some indicators. I think it's very important, especially here, that obviously we need to address sex disaggregated data, and that really needs to be input. It's quantitative, it's statistical, but actually it is a target and we can measure progress against that. And we also need to present gender and socially responsive development impacts and an M&E framework. And I just want to say that it's time consuming and it's expensive, and it needs to be budgeted for in your projects if you're going to actually realistically achieve anything in these projects when it comes to gender and social inclusion. So just in terms of monitoring, gender disaggregated data is helpful, but it doesn't tell the entire story. Do not rely on your stats alone to say that we have gender equality or we reach X amount of beneficiaries in the communities or countries or places that you're working. It is essential, but it's not everything. Who are you working with? On what terms are you working with them? How are you working with them? Why are you working with them? These are some of the questions that need to be answered throughout. It's just not relying on that data alone. We also, like I said, we need to look and reflect upon our team makeup. Who are we collaborating with and where? What do those teams look like? Do they represent the societies and communities that we work in? A lot of the time, unfortunately, they don't. But actually, how can we address that over the lifespan of a 12 to 36-month project? Monitoring and evaluation. It's often sort of given insufficient attention. I've put it here that it's often required by the donor. We all sit there with our log frames, logic models, and think, oh no, we have to do that, but we'll deal with it at the end of the project. By that point, actually, we haven't necessarily collected the real data that's needed to look into that. And that's one of the problems. It's a burdensome task, but somebody has to do it. And the value in that going forward is invaluable. And again, we need to look and think about who we are working with in country. Obviously, how Energy Catalyst has evolved is that it's not a prerequisite, but there is, in a sense, a requirement to work with partners overseas, international partners. And so actually we think that actually we'll work with local partners on the ground and their team makeup because they're already on the ground. They know the context and they know the situation. That is very true, but those teams themselves have their own set of stereotypes and biases that they already work within, and it's being able to address some of those. So this sort of field staff may think that they are gender neutral, for example, but actually often that they're not. Women are underrepresented in the field, in the countries that we're working very much of the time. They're not represented in meetings. They have very little voice. So actually it's about not just looking at the project's partners themselves, it's looking at their team makeup as well to ensure that we're addressing gender and social inclusion. And then obviously I've just sort of put that external project supervisors and evaluators do not always emphasise gender and social inclusion, so it's often forgotten. So there's one thing to say, oh, we're going to do it as a sort of token. Yes, you know, we're going to work with X amount of men, X amount of women, X amount of youth, and they can tick the box, and we've got this sex disaggregated data that looks into it. But actually, when we delve into it, we want to actually really analyse and report what that looks like when it comes to the projects, the products you're selling, the markets that you're targeting. Actually, the data is very thin. So, thank you. It was short and sweet, which is probably good in some ways. But like I said, gender and social inclusion has to be in your projects. It has to be at the application stage. And what I've spoken about are some reference points, some basics to understand how you can start to address that and monitor that throughout the duration of your projects and your partnerships. Please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. Also raise your hand. But also if it's anything specific to the application process, I will probably also be reverting back to my colleagues at Innovate. So thank you.
So you set out all admirable, but are they overly achievable for an SME to manage all of that? Now, it's very hard for even a company that the likes of BP to do that. But for small enterprises that are in this room, I always like to remind everyone that every goal should be achievable. Is this, a lot of this, is this achievable, all the tasks you outlined?
It's an interesting question. I mean, we didn't achieve the MDGs, but that didn't stop us being even more optimistic and putting in place the SDGs. And at this place, many of the SDGs are falling very far short of meeting their 2030 targets. And so I think just because something is perhaps too far ahead doesn't mean we shouldn't be achieving it. And I definitely agree. I think when it comes to your business, your company, you need to look at your capacity and your strengths and who you are and how you work and who you work with and what it is achievable. And I think what I said at the beginning is that actually what I've sort of outlined is sort of gender and social inclusion, the entire package. But actually we can probably take one or two very few aspects of that. You know, as a small SME, do you want to get to 50% of female employees and promoting their development? For example, that could just be one that could be potentially achievable in the lifespan of the project. And again, working with certain consumer groups, I think taking small steps, taking small aspects of the broader gender and social inclusion package is probably much more achievable than the bigger thing. And so I think it's probably more of a reflective point for yourself, your company, and the project you want to do. It's actually what can be achieved in the timescale you're planning to do that in.
There's a question to Niall's left, yeah.
So I'm from academic institution, from Imperial. So if my project is successful, so I'm going to take only one postdoc, so for 12 months span. So how it will be balanced, like gender equality? So one postdoc, it may be male or female. So it will be very, very difficult to include gender equality, right? Like we need a skilled person.
But it's not necessarily about, your team makeup.
Okay.
It's actually looking at the project content. Actually, what are you looking to deliver? Where are you looking to deliver it? And who are you delivering that to? And that's, like you said, if you're a very small team, you can't always, be in charge of that sort of perhaps that makeup of that team. But actually, when it comes to the content of your project, I mean, let's face it, if you're doing an energy project, you need to be looking at women. So if you're not, then it's, there's something seriously wrong. So I think you probably should be addressing that in the content of your project.
So it's beyond, after 12 months, end users also I need to address.
I mean, a lot of Energy Catalyst is about legacy now. It's about, okay, yes, you've only got funding for 12 months, but actually, how can we potentially, as a company, as an academic institution, or as this product, how does it go beyond the lifespan of this grant? And actually what can be achieved. And then that's really when you can start to look into gender and social inclusion in much more detail. It's okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify something. So in terms of gender inclusion, is it more about the end product and its impact as opposed to like the team makeup in terms of who you're partnering with? Because I know that, for instance, I'm from Nigeria, and I know that in some regions, well, where I'm from is a bit different, but in some other regions of Nigeria, it's quite like patriarchal culturally, where and it's not necessarily a bad thing all the time. Sometimes it's just, the women tend to sometimes even prefer to stay at home and raise children, etc. But my question is, does it mean that such societies would be excluded because this is basically targeting societies that are open to sort of like a 50-50 model? I hope I'm sort of clear in that.
No, I mean, in terms of the application, in terms of sort of partnership and like sort of collaborative makeup versus sort of the product, I mean. Double check with Alice, but there won't be, I don't think, any sort of discrimination about that. It's about perhaps just acknowledging certain factors within that project team and the makeup of that. When it comes to the product itself, completely, we, especially cooking, for example, is completely, patriarchal, and women are often designated to that task. And so that's also why when we design clean cook stoves, the first thing we do is there's going to be 3 billion women beneficiaries because they're the ones that do the cooking. However, I think it's also accepting, knowing your market. So I think it's about saying that we work in this area and this particular technology, we know that 70% recruits men because that's the way that things work. Is there opportunity to expand? Potentially, and I think a lot of where I come from as well, we talk about the R&D, the research element, and that's where even with a product, with a technology, you still should be doing that research on the side. So it is about looking at the market. Who are you targeting? You're not going to be, especially in your application, you're not going to be targeted because actually we work very much in patriarchal societies. We work within community hierarchies as well. Actually, we can't, unless we go to community elders first, we're not going to be able to get to anybody else in society. But I think it's acknowledging that, and very often in the past with energy projects, that's been completely overlooked. The socioeconomic, the cultural attributes of communities and markets we work in are completely overlooked. And I think it's about acknowledging that and saying, how can we perhaps monitor that and see the scope for actually change. I don't like to use the word change, but actually just seeing how things develop over the course of your project.
I'm wondering. Oh,
sorry, we are pushing for time.
Is there a place where we can see SMEs who were very successful, very creative in implementing forward positive gender approach? Something that we can learn from?
Yes. I mean, there are so many SMEs, organisations that do gender and social inclusion and do it well. But it's sort of like a minefield. It depends on the context.
Sorry, do you mean in respect of energy catalyst bids?
Or in general, yeah.
I would say in general, but what I meant is where I can see what the company actually did, what strategies they actually did to be successful in terms of gender.
So I think also when it comes to SMEs, you probably, if you're working in a specific region, specific country, I would start, and that would be the very beginning of your search, actually who works what and where, and what have they been doing? Have they addressed such issues? For example, Energia, ODI, they do a lot of work on gender and social inclusion. So that is a wealth of resource, toolkits, etc. Energia, definitely. However, business-wise, SME companies, I don't know. There are lots of businesses that work very well in these areas.
Apparently Ed does know.
Oh, Ed knows.
I just wanted to add that there is a project that the Shell Foundation have been supporting through an organisation called Value for Women. And they've been looking at the kind of examples, particularly actually from the energy sector, about why taking women as customers and women as involved in companies and so on, how that's actually affected the bottom line of companies working in the sector. If we have a look, I'll see if we can get something put up on the site in relation to the work that they've done.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, yeah? Yeah. Okay.
I thought the gentleman sort of meant the SME market. I mean, there's lots of information, there's lots of literature out there of actually why it's important and crucial for women to be involved in value chain and business models when it comes to energy. But in terms of actually identifying those specific SMEs and how they've been able to do it, I think that's going through the various sort of contacts and networks that we have. Solar Sister, for example, are a wonderful organisation, work all over Africa, that I would definitely recommend you look into.
John.
Yes, I just want to relate my favourite, if awful, anecdote about gendering projects, which was related to me from a colleague in Malawi who was working on an island project in Lake Malawi, introducing household water systems to the small communities there. And this project had some immensely good things about it, and the provision of household water seemed like a great idea. However, they did come along later on and find out that the suicide rate amongst women had climbed quite substantially since that project implemented the water provision. It turned out that, unbeknownst to them, washing clothes and getting water from the lake was actually a very important social occasion for women to get together.
Absolutely.
And that normally they were stuck in the house altogether, and once the water supply was piped directly into the house, that social occasion had gone, and the concomitant results in terms of depressive behaviours was really quite substantial. So the point is not just that by including gender you can make life better for women in the community, but that if you don't take it into account, you stand the chance of doing some substantial harm. That's not going to say that your project will kill people if you don't do the proper thing, but you should be doing it
John.
because we want to do no harm is the first law of intervention. It should be.
On which happy note?
That wasn't me, okay? I just want to say that.
Thank you, Charlotte. That's fantastic. And I hope, yeah. And I hope that really does reinforce the point that this is not just a nice to have or a box to tick.